Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we are going to talk about caregivers and how to take care of ourselves as we care for our loved ones. It's an important subject. This week, I got really thinking about it, and I welcome you to join me in that. I'm going to start by sharing this story. This lady had shared her story. She was caring for her mother. And what happened is it started out by just a sec. So it started out by, she had a job, her parents were doing great, and then her mom started getting sick. And her mother was more of the primary giver for their father. So the mother started getting sick, and this lady started accommodating. First of all, her life was, she went to work, she would come home, rest, do her life. And then as her mom started to get sick and was unable to call to fill in her prescriptions, her husband prescriptions, started becoming a big task for the mom. So this lady started now stopping in on the way from work, should stop in her parents' home, make sure they have their prescriptions, make sure they have food. If they needed to go errands, should make sure she ran to the store, brought them food before going home. And so this became her new norm. Was she still was living in her home, but she was now starting to take her parents' needs into account. And the more her mom became sick, the more she took on a lot of the care. She would go and get the medications. Now she's also making sure they are going for their appointments. And you see, what happened is that started to take over her life. Now she did not have time to go home and rest and take care of herself because all of her extra time was spent taking care of her parents' needs. And her parents' needs increased to where they even started interfering with her work schedules. Now she had to take a day off because she had to take care of her parents' needs. And it progressed on and on to where she couldn't even work anymore. And her role all of a sudden shifted completely to being a full time caregiver for her parents. And she took care of them, and that's all she did because that's, I can tell you that as a caregiver, it's a double job. Okay. So eventually her mom became, terminal, became really sick, and finally the mom died. And when the mother died, this woman's life collapsed. She had lost her identity, and she had picked up this new identity called the caregiver's identity. So I got thinking about that this week because Thursday last week, I had a full day of appointments to bring my family to. None of them was my appointment, but it was the full day. Friday, full day of appointments. We have to see this specialist for this. We have to see that specialist for that. We have to see this specialist for the other. And in all these appointments, I have to speak on behalf of my family, advocate. I have to try to figure out what's going on with the medications, with the decisions being made. That was last week, Thursday, Friday for me. And then Monday, Tuesday, yesterday, this week was also full days of appointments. Same story. These specialists, we gotta discuss this. These other specialists, we gotta discuss that. These other specialists, we gotta discuss the other. And it was 4 consecutive days of 1 hour drive one way to the hospitals and the clinics, and 1 hour drive back home. What does that leave me with? So this week, yesterday actually, as I was ending my day yesterday, it reminded me of this woman. And I thought, wow, such is the caregiving role. And this is not the first time. I mean, first of all, I believe I'm a caregiver naturally. I believe it's in me. It's something I love to do. I enjoy to do is caregiving. Um, my mother was a natural caregiver, so she passed that on to me very well. But yesterday, I got thinking about this woman who had shared her story. And I also got thinking of my son's younger days. I was his primary caregiver, still am, but going through the medical journey with my son, that was my identity, like 100%. Thank God his life is very stable now. But when he was younger, it was constant hospital, constant appointments, constant emergency room, constant. And guess what? A complete caregiver identity, because everything I thought in life revolved around my son. If it didn't work out for my son, it didn't work out for me. So the caregiver identity causes a person to forget themselves. And all of a sudden, life becomes about the person that you are caring for. If I had to travel, I had to make sure that it worked for my son to travel. If it didn't work for him to travel, I was not going to travel. Another thing about caregivers is that they can get so caught up in caregiving that that they don't want help. So going through this journey with my son, where he was admitted in the hospital a lot. And guess what? When he was admitted in the hospital, I was in the hospital 247. I only left to go take a shower, have a change of clothes, come back. So basically, it becomes an identity. It becomes an identity. And yeah, life just revolved around my son. That's all I thought about. Any decision I had to make, the first person I thought about was not me, it was my son. Um, the other thing is you start to feel like, because you get to know and to be very familiar with the situation, now it starts to become really hard as a caregiver to assign that role to somebody else, because you feel like they won't do it well. What if something happens? This person won't know what to do. It also made me look back to my mother, who was a natural caregiver and was providing care for my father, and how her life revolved around my father. She was always worried about him. And even when she tried to convince him, don't go to the shop, because he would go to the shop and he would fall. I can look back and I remember when my mother was begging me, she's like, McKenna, build this shop for your father. He goes to the shop, Mekombone, and sometimes coming back home, he has sight problems. He'll step in a ditch and fall, and he's not able to get himself up. And people have had to pick him from the ditch and bring him home. And he would say, I'm really worried about what's going to happen to your father one of these days. Um, and one of my family members had offered to build the shop for my dad at home, but it wasn't working out because something had held things back for my family member. And so my mom was going constantly every day. She's like, McKenna, I need you to do this now. So anyway, I built the shop for my dad at home, the shop that he never ended up using. Because once the shop was built at home, he he never really connected to even being motivated to start doing anything with that shop. So once the shop was built at home, it satisfied him. That was his shop right there at home, but he never really got to use it. But as a caregiver, my mom's life revolved around my dad. She was always worried about him. When my father would go, so at first, my mom would go to the shop with my dad. But as my mom got more sick, she was unable to go to the shop with my dad. And so my dad continued to go to the shop by himself, but he was getting more confused. Sometimes he would be confused and lost. Sometimes he would fall in the ditches. And my mother was always worried. She was always worried. Like she would be home and she would be super worried about my dad. Sometimes she would send someone to go with him or go there and make sure is he still there? Can you bring him home? This was her life. When my dad went to the cows, my mom would go there and be with him or bring him back to the house. So, and it was interesting looking back. I wondered, Mom, why do you do this? Let him be. He wants to be with the cows. And my mom would say, McKenna, you don't understand. Your father will stay there the whole night if I don't go and somehow get him back to the house. He won't know that it's night. And I'm thinking this is just my mom being my mom. But now, as I'm taking care of my dad, I can look back to my mom. And sometimes it's guilt. That's another thing with caregivers, is the guilt that come in going, wow, my mother dealt with a lot. And I had no idea how a lot she was dealing with on a daily basis. I didn't fully understand until I was the one in that position of being my dad's caregiver. I had no idea how much my mom was dealing with. So sometimes as a caregiver, I find myself struggling with guilt that I didn't see some of these things that were written. Now, looking hindsight bias means I'm using the information I have now to judge the past. That's what hindsight bias is. And it's horrible because many caregivers deal with this. So I can look back with what I know now and I realize how much my mother suffered. And sometimes it aches my heart. I have found myself grieving heavily, crying because I look back and I realize how much my mother suffered. Now, today, my mother is not suffering, but it still gets me some days as I look back and I'm like, why did I not see this? I can look back and I can see it written all over the walls. And I'm like, why did I miss this? But, you know, I live far away I live in America. My parents lived in Kenya. And I noticed things the times I was there, but nothing tells you the little things you are noticing, how big they are until you are submerged in the situation. But sometimes I catch myself struggling with guilt and I have to educate my own thoughts and minds and say, no, don't be hard on yourself. This is what's going on. This, at that time, you didn't know what you know now. You are not taking care of your dad then, so you had no idea what the needs are, what it was like. But yet, I can look back and remember my mom, she would put her pain aside to take care of my father's needs. And then I look back and I remember even when I offered to hire a caregiver for my mom, she refused. She said, no, I'm okay. But she was suffering, still putting my dad's needs ahead of her needs. She suffered a lot. Finally, she became too sick to where in July of 2023, she agreed, yes, McKenna, I'll take a caregiver. And from July, she had a caregiver until December when she died. So for about 5 months, she had a caregiver. But guess what? Even with having a caregiver, even with having house help, my mother still continued to push herself to take care of my dad's needs until she couldn't move anymore because her identity became a caregiver. Without caring for somebody, I'm a nobody. That's what a caregiver identity do does to somebody. So I'm sharing all these things to caregivers to be aware of yourself. As you are a caregiver, be aware that the role of a caregiver can change you extremely, and especially if you're not taking time to reflect, also taking help. It's okay to let other people help you. It doesn't mean you love your loved one less. It doesn't mean you don't care as much. It's okay to have somebody else come and orient them to your loved one and go shopping and totally get out of the caregiving role. Also, looking back to me raising my son, I never could travel or go anywhere for, I could go to work for a few hours, run, and at work, I'm always thinking, oh my goodness, I hope he's okay all day. But it's okay to let other people care for your loved one so that you can take a clear break. In my book, Become Whole, Unbreakable, and Unstoppable, I speak to the subject of never letting yourself lose your identity in this little book, Become Whole, Unbreakable, and Unstoppable. Become whole, unbreakable, and unstoppable. Because life has a way of breaking you, life has a way of changing you, life has a way of stopping you. But you can shield yourself, you can grow yourself so that no matter what life brings, you are able to stand on your feet. So, caregivers, the caregiver identity causes somebody to put themselves aside. It's literally you become like you don't exist, and your identity becomes the caregiver. It's important to always keep your identity. Who are you? Who are you before you get married? Keep that identity. When you get married, many women lose their identity when they get married. And now it's all about the husband. And they don't know who they are. And then if something happens to their husband, or if there's a divorce, you find that woman is lost. They don't know who they are. They are completely lost. The other one is big motherhood. Many women lose their identity to motherhood. In Kenya, when somebody becomes a mom, their name all of a sudden vanishes, and everybody says, Mama so and so, Mama so and so. And all of a sudden, it's like a woman never had an identity. Their identity becomes the mother of so and so. And so, I tell people in Kenya, no, your name matters. Your name matters. So I go there and they are like, Mama Nate. And I go, my name is McKenna. My name matters. I am McKenna before I'm Nate's mother. I am McKenna before I'm Sally's mother. I am McKenna before I'm Steve's wife. I'm McKenna before I'm Mongatia's daughter, Dorothy's daughter. I'm McKenna. I love my identity. And one of the things that the Lord showed me is to really be careful about my identity. Hang tight to my identity. Who am I in Christ? What is my core in life? What am I doing to advance my core? So, being a caregiver for my son, and I learned a lot even going through that, and even as my son's life became stable, just thinking about the role of reflecting is very important. Taking time to reflect. How are things affecting you? As a hospice chaplain, taking time to reflect. How is carrying other people's burdens changing me? But here's the thing. As a hospice chaplain, this is the story of very many caregivers. Now, this is one woman that I gave her story very well. But as a hospice chaplain, this was the end of the day. You hear very many wives, especially when the husband dies. I remember this one woman, she didn't have a bank account. She didn't know where to go and put oil in her car. She didn't know how to pump gas in her car. Now, in America, we don't get service with gas. You pump your own gas. This woman didn't know how to pump gas in her car because her husband, he would always take the vehicle that needed gas. He loved his wife. He really cared for her. But I'm sorry, women, learn to be independent as a woman. Learn to be independent as a woman. Proverbs 31 woman is that's um my mentor on how to be a woman. And my mother was amazing, very independent woman. As a woman, learn to be independent because anything can happen in life. So this one woman that I remember, one of actually a few, but this was like really extreme. Her husband provided her with everything, and she was a stay-home mom, never had a job, never. And then her husband died, and he provided well for her, but he didn't have the best insurance to take care of his wife after he died because he thought he was going to be here and take care of his wife. And a disease came and very quickly took his life. And this woman was lost. This was many years ago. This woman was lost. She had no idea where to go get gas, where to pump gas, where to go for oil change. She had no idea how do you go to the bank. She had no idea. And she had got married straight from high school. So, as a woman, it's very important to be independent. It's important to know these things for yourself. Know how to take care of yourself. Know how you can survive if your husband is not there. because things happen in life. So, anyway, but many caregivers would have the stories of where, so many caregivers would start from being an accountant, something else out there that had nothing to do with caregiving. And as they shift into the caregiver identity role, they shift and now they become a caregiver. It's all they do is care for their loved one. This woman shared after her mother died, she ended up going to look for a caregiving job. That completely shifted her identity, and now moving forward, she was a caregiver. She went to find a caregiving role. Now, I don't know if that ended up being her story for the rest of her life, but she shifted from where she worked before her parents got sick to becoming their full-time caregiver to now shifting into a caregiving type of a job. And many people, they shift like that and they acquire the caregiver identity. It's important that even, and one of the things that I would encourage people who are in the caregiving role and going through the grieving process is don't jump into becoming a caregiver. Yes, you want to find a role where you can go and help people. Please don't jump into it as soon as your loved one dies, because you will not give yourself time to grieve and come to reality with what just happened to you. Also, you need to become healthy again, because healthy caregivers should not acquire a caregiver identity. It's not a healthy thing. When you don't live and your whole identity is wrapped on being a caregiver, you are not yourself. And so it's important to come back in touch with yourself. It's important as a caregiver to take care of yourself. It's important to come back, step back. What are the boundaries? Where do you seek help? Where do you draw a line on the sand and say, I'm not going to do this because this is not good for me? This is not helping me. This is killing me too. Other caregivers become caregivers, and then the caregiver ends up dying before the person they are caring for. That was the story for my mom. She ended up dying before my dad, and she was always worried. She would ask me, will you manage your father? Do you know he is not the same? My mother felt like nobody else could care for my dad, and she submerged her life into it. And now my dad is being cared for, and she's gone. It's the story with many other caregivers that I have met, where they put themselves on the shelf to care for their loved one, and then they neglect themselves to where they end up dying fast. So, hear me, caregivers. Take care of yourself. Please don't lose your identity. Be a caregiver who has your own identity. One of the things that I really thank God for is that He helped me, even when I didn't understand that I had really submerged myself into the caregiver identity, caring for my son when he was little. I didn't understand what I understand today, but when he was little, I even didn't go for doctor's appointments. That was not important. It was all about my son, and it was a lot because he was in the hospital a lot. Constant appointments, sometimes run, look for medication, sometimes drive all over the Twin Cities because his pharmacy didn't have the medication, and I have to run to this other pharmacy and that other pharmacy, and it was wild. But God got me through that, and over his life becoming more stable, and then of course education and the role that I have done for many years of being a hospice chaplain, I have grown, and I got to realize your identity is very important, which is why I ended up writing this book, Become Whole, Unbreakable, and Unstoppable. Your identity is extremely important. Do not let your identity disappear in the process of caring for your loved one. And that takes intention. It's something you have to think about, take time to reflect. So now, as I care for my father, I'm very aware of that. So I get help. I ask for help and I take a break. I step aside, and it's been working. So I refuse to tell myself that I'm the only person who can care for my father the best. I refuse to do that to myself. So I ask for help and I get help. And I let the rest of my family care for my dad. I let the rest of my family help me out and I step aside. So I'm living my life as I'm caring for my dad. I'm living my life. I work, I keep my job, I'm going to school, but it's still not easy. It's still a lot, it's still extra. But the message I have for caregivers is be aware. Don't let caregiving change you and shift your identity. Because what happens is when your loved one either dies or things shift and you are not the caregiver anymore, many people lose themselves. Some people almost go crazy. So you hear caregivers, like when I do bereavement for people after the death of their loved one, some of the things people say are, I wake up at the middle of the night and I pick up the phone call to call. Or I wake up at the middle of the night and I panic. I'm looking all over the house for my husband. Why? Because their mind went too much into caregiving. And so after the death of their husband, their death of their loved one, the mom, the dad, they are waking up at night with panic attacks because they are thinking they forgot to do something, they missed on something, and their mind become almost crazy. Plus, this is what I've done. Some people say I can't even sit still because I was so busy. My mom, constant calls, constant run, do this, give medication. They are calling, they are in pain. You run and you run, and then after the mom dies, like, how do you sit? You feel like you are lost. Am I supposed to be sitting? Am I supposed to be doing something else? They disappeared, and their role became that of being a caregiver. It's all they think about. Many caregivers. So, my call to caregivers today is take good care of yourself, work very hard to maintain your identity. Do not lose your identity. Do not let yourself lose your identity. Know who you are and do everything you can to maintain that as you care for your loved one. Here is a good one. This one is outside of caregiving, but think of many marriages. Many marriages, the the parents focus on taking care of the children, and all of a sudden their life revolves around their children. They forget each other. It's like when they met, they were in love, they loved to hang out, they loved to sit down and just talk and just be the two of them. And then the children come and the focus becomes their children. Now they don't go and sit down together like they used to. It's one is coming in because the other one has to go to work. Now there's the children, I'm going to work, and they don't have time to nurture their relationship as a husband and wife. And they raise their children 18, 20 years. Their children is their focus. They forgot about each other. And a lot of marriages, sadly, 20, 30-year-old marriages, they end after the last child leaves the house. All of a sudden. And then, of course, marriages have problems. Sometimes there's things, misunderstandings, resentment, and all that that come in between. But guess what? These couples, many couples, don't have time to resolve their little conflicts. And these conflicts grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And the enemy keeps lying to them, oh, he doesn't care. She doesn't care. He doesn't care. She doesn't care. But yet, the other person doesn't know that you are upset. They don't know that they hurt your feelings. And this continues for years. It just builds up and it builds up. And then once this last child leaves the house, it's the big news. I'm out of here. I'm done with this marriage because you've been horrible towards me. And there's usually like no effort to even try to save the marriage because the couple is so resentful towards each other and they are all done. They are all moving opposite directions. And many of these couples later on, they end up regretting. They end up realizing what happened when it's too late. They have moved on, they have got other relationships and found out the other relationships are not better. So, also for couples, take care of your marriage when you're raising your children. This is just the caregiver identity is so spread. Today, I'm focusing on terminal illness and caring for our elderly loved ones. But think about your life and see where the caregiver identity is taking over your identity, it's taking over your life, it's taking over your marriage, and maybe start working on some of those things so that when those kids grow, they can come back home to their parents and bring grandchildren to their parents instead of parting ways. Those children will never stop needing you. So work on your marriage while you are raising your children. Take time to spend time together as a husband and wife. Do things to celebrate each other. Solve your conflicts as they happen. Don't let them heap up. Solve them as they happen so that they don't grow and become bigger and bigger. But today, my call is for caregivers. Don't lose your identity in caring for your loved one. Losing your identity doesn't mean you love your parents more or your spouse. If you're caring for your spouse, your husband, your wife, it doesn't mean you love them more when you let yourself lose your identity. It just means you're neglecting yourself. It's not good for you and it's not good for anybody. So work hard to maintain your identity as you care for your loved one. God bless.